Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. You know, sometimes Tottenham fans say we're just not allowed nice things. I think that's the case with this international break. You know, we went into it in rather good spirits, top of the table after 3 games, into the group stages in Europe. And for some Spurs fans, obviously, the very strange sight of also seeing Arsenal at the bottom of the table. We smiled too soon, didn't we? This bizarro international break has brought 3 players currently stranded abroad in Croatia. 2 of them having been chased around a pitch in Brazil by Brazilian health officials. It's seen Sonny have to miss a game, hopefully through precautionary reasons, after he felt discomfort in a muscle during training with South Korea. It's seen Ryan Sessegnon have to come back to Tottenham after picking up a knock in training with England under-21s. Last night, Oliver Skipp had to come off with the official explanation afterwards by England under-21 boss Lee Carsley was he felt stiffness in his groin. Insert all your carry-on jokes here, matron, and all of those references mean absolutely nothing for probably anyone under about 30, 35. But yes, so he also said, but Ollie's quite robust, or Skippy, I think he calls him as well. So fingers crossed that that's not a bad one. It was more precautionary because he felt it started to tighten up. And then even Steven Bergwijn came off last night for the Netherlands and immediately had to have loads of ice wrapped around his ankle. Now, whether that's a fresh injury or whether that's just the after effects that he has sometimes of, I don't know if you remember, he picked up that really bad ankle injury against, I think it was Burnley in Mourinho's first season, and he had to have surgery on it. I do wonder whether, as someone myself that's had ankle injuries in football before, whether it's something that just afterwards just sometimes swells up a bit. It could be. It might be that he rolled again. I don't know, so I'm not definitively going to say on that. But yeah, it's just a mad international break, and it does make you wonder who's gonna be playing against Crystal Palace now this weekend. I've seen some people maybe going slightly overboard, saying, "Oh my God, the transfer window was awful. Now you can see." It's a bit like, and I've seen people digging out Harry Winks again, and not to sound like an old bore, but look, whatever you believe about Harry Winks, if Harry Winks can't go to Crystal Palace and do the job, then there seriously is a problem. And I do think that he can go there and do a job. I think now he's become, now Sissoko's gone, now Aurier's gone, now all of these particular maybe scapegoats have gone. I think Winks is probably going to be the one that gets it, unfortunately, this season. Possibly on Ndombele. But yeah, sorry. Well, he actually leads me to the point as well. So if you don't have Skipp and Lo Celso's in Croatia, then, you do have Winks and Ndombele. You've got Højbjerg. There's still options there. It's nothing to particularly panic about, says Alistair. And then the next day, we find out there's been more injuries to like Højbjerg or something. Oh, please don't happen. And yes, I referred to myself in the third person, which was really sad. And apologies if I get really hot, by the way. It's a baking day here. And I've had to close every window because they're doing work on finally, hopefully, bringing me super fast broadband. Not me, but the whole road. So I'm definitely not going to go out there and tell them to stop. But it does mean hot house, windows closed. Anyway, there's my weekly apology out of the way. I'm not going to go too much into, probably barely at all, into the whole Romero, Lo Celso, Sanchez situation because I'm very aware that anyone that also listens to the podcast I do with Guesty, Golden Guest Talk Tottenham, I went into a bit of a 15-minute rant about the whole situation. And I'm very wary that if anyone's listened to the podcast and is now watching this or listening to this, you're just going to get the same rant again. And I don't really want to do that. So just very much in about 60 seconds, essentially, complete mess. I'd probably say, despite what some people are trying to claim, I actually think Tottenham for once probably aren't really too much to blame in this. It's very much a case of Tottenham was sticking with the other 17 clubs. Well, originally it was 18 other clubs to not send players to red list countries. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, Aston Villa changed their mind, did a bit of a U-turn, let Buendia and Martinez go from their ranks to play for Argentina, which then made it even more difficult, I think, for Lo Celso and Romero to kind of say, well, why aren't we going? Tottenham explained to them, look, it's kind of at the end of the day, you're not prisoners. We cannot lock you in a room. If you decide you're going to go, then there will be consequences. We will fine you because our stance is we're sticking with the other Premier League clubs and EFL clubs and not letting our players go. If you want to do it, that's kind of your lookout and it's kind of on your watch. You'll be fined. And I believe even this training camp in Croatia, I don't think is put on by Spurs either. Spurs have kind of, I think we heard Nuno Espirito Santo say it after the Watford game, will look for a plan, a way of doing it. And they had agreed with the players, I think I said this last week, that, look, if you're going to go, at least don't play in the last game so that you're not going to be stuck out another week and miss more games. That was a bit dicey at one point. It looked like Lionel Scaloni, the Argentina boss, had completely decided no. And that only Villa were going to get that with their two players because they'd officially released them. But then someone had a word. And now, they're now in Croatia with Sanchez. I think Spurs have sent over a fitness coach to work with them. And obviously, that's not even dipping into the absolute farce that was the game in Brazil, where those 4 Premier League players came in separately on a private jet and someone didn't declare that they come in from the UK. I'm not entirely sure how you managed to do that when the jet you'd imagine came from the UK, but I don't know. And then, then we had this weird thing of, I think it's called Anvisa. I think it's Anvisa. Brazilian health officials actually storming the game and stopping it after 5 minutes to try and get those players either deported or into 14 days of quarantine in Brazil. Utter farce. And from Tottenham's side, they're just thoroughly fed up and angry about the whole situation when obviously they'd made it very clear so that stuff like this didn't happen. Romero went over there to play 6 minutes of football. Lo Celso played, I think it's 62 in the first game, and in those couple of minutes in the second one, it really wasn't worth it whatsoever. And like I said, I think I said this last week, not everyone really definitely wanted to go, but ultimately there's a lot of pressure from the federations, the national football associations of each country. There's not only that, but the passion from the fans in their homeland of how it would look. And this is only one of 3 international breaks before we even get to Christmas. So essentially, if this blanket rule is going to exist, then these players are going to miss the bulk of their World Cup qualifying campaign now for the rest of it, and likely not play in the World Cups. I kind of get it from the players' point of view, but I also understand the point of view from the clubs who are just like, what a mess, and now we've lost you for potentially 2 games. I think they'll miss Palace and Rennes. I was trying to work out permutations where they could get back for Rennes, but I just think it would maybe be too difficult to get them into France. And I don't know whether day 0, because, see, I've gone over to 60 seconds, so sorry about this, but I think that in certain aspects of isolation, the first day you arrive counts as day 0. I'm not entirely sure how that works with 10 days in a foreign country. And if you're wondering why they went to Croatia, it's because Croatia's green list, and they can spend 10 days there and then come straight back into England without quarantining. I think Romero probably could have anyway had it been Amberless, because I think he's fully vaccinated, or he's got that one jab one. I think I said that before. So yeah, that's that. So utter mess. We await to see what the injuries are and hopefully none of them are too bad. We wait to see. It'd be interesting to see if we get any images of the 3 out in Croatia. I think they've probably burned quite badly by even posting the photo of themselves heading out on the private jet. I've heard some people saying, like, why is Sanchez getting fined as well as the other 2 when obviously the other 2 had all the mess happen? Just purely because if you're saying they can't go, you've got to fine all of them. I do also agree with some people saying, how can you fine them when clearly it was a FIFA edict that all players must be released? FIFA were weird about it. Not weird, but FIFA were very much, I think Infantino even came out and said, look, you are obligated, clubs, to make this happen. And I think that's why the Premier League clubs actually banded together and did this, thing of saying we all stand together. If you're going to sanction one of us, you sanction all of us. And none of the Brazil players went. But of course, it's Tottenham Hotspur, so ridiculous things must happen. It's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy what they find themselves in the middle of. There was a part of me that didn't want a snooze fest of an international break because to write about it's a nightmare. But the other side of me is like, Tottenham again in the middle of everything. It was mad. So that was that. And then the other tiny, very quick thing is Daniel Levy's been appointed as a member of the board for the European Club Association, which I had someone on Twitter, I wrote a story about it yesterday, was like, if it doesn't bring in money to Spurs, I don't care. And it was like, whoa, that's pretty blunt. But I think it's pretty obvious that if you are now sitting at the table of the power brokers in football, I mean, the ECA are the ones that do essentially all the negotiation with UEFA over club competitions, marketing, everything. And to be able to be sitting among those people that make decisions, it was previously Man U types. It was Ed Woodward, I think Gill before that as well. I think it's kind of Man U have had a bit of, I think there was an FA chief was on it before as well. But yeah, and now it's Tottenham, and now it's Daniel Levy. And whatever you kind of make of it, and to be fair, it's a bit of a U-turn, especially after everything that happened with the Super League stuff. You know, the English clubs were coming out of the ECA, and then 9 of them, I think it was, applied to, please don't kick us out, please let us back. And one of those was Spurs. And apparently, Soriano, I've forgotten the name of the Man City CEO, he was running against Levy, and actually, reportedly, pulled out of the race because he realised that Levy had the support of pretty much everyone in the Premier League, so including Arsenal, I think. So I think this is the thing, is, you know, myself included, we slate Daniel Levy for some of the mistakes made over the years, but I think also from other clubs looking in, especially with the pandemic and the financial ruin quite a few of them are in, I think seeing how Tottenham, despite not being one of the big boys in terms of finance, have managed to build this huge, amazing, one of the world's best stadiums and the training ground, and they run, you know, they're going to be probably one of the stronger teams coming out of the pandemic because of the way they were structured. And I think a lot of other clubs have looked at that and said, yeah, we'll have a bit of that. And I think that's probably a lot to do with why he's been appointed. It's he and the Atletico Madrid CEO and the Inter Milan one as well. So 2 other clubs that are in the Super League. So yeah, I think it can only be a good thing for Tottenham. You know, whatever you make of Levy, whatever you make of anything, I think just being able to be there and be part of the decision-making process, especially, you know, part of their job will be to look at this international mess that's going on. And Spurs having been affected, you know, other Premier League clubs have looked at what's happened to Spurs in recent days and just gone, whoa, no way are we letting them go in future windows if, you know, FIFA and the UK government do not agree some kind of exemption. And even then, what happened in Brazil wasn't even to do with the UK one. Obviously, it's Brazil's rules were, you know, UK people coming over from the UK had to quarantine for 14 days. So you'd need an exemption in every country, essentially. It's a mess, and I cannot see how it's going to work. I think, I've got a feeling there's even an international break in January as well, during the winter window. I'm sure I read that somewhere. Which is just insane. It's to fit them all in, the ones that were missed. Anyway, right, I'm actually going to wrap up there in terms of me just chatting what the things I want to talk about, because I did promise last week that I'd do a Q&A. So that's what I'm going to do, and just to make it even more amusing for myself, I haven't even looked at the questions yet. I'm going to do it a bit of a kind of a quick fire, kind of my brain's going to have to work these out quite quickly. Not that I did much research before, which probably might have noticed, but in previous ones I've at least written them all down, and so I've seen them before I've answered them. But I'm just going to crack on. I've got in front of me, I've got the comments everyone's left last time, and I'm going to, apologies, second apology of the week. You will see me kind of taking a moment just to scroll through, because sometimes there's questions and then some people have just left comments. So right, let's kick off with a nice easy one. Yash Jai Singh asks, Ali, what's the status with the training kit sponsor? Still no updates with it. Well, that's a nice easy one, because that has finally been announced. I think you might have heard me, I think I wrote the story originally. I broke this one in July, saying that Spurs had signed a new deal, a training kit sponsorship deal. And it was finally announced the other day that it is Getir. I think they're a Turkish company, like a home delivery type, shopping delivery type company. What's slightly annoying is that if you remember, Getir were announced as like a stadium partner or a club partner type thing maybe a month ago. And I actually went to Getir, and because I had an inkling that they were the ones that were going to be the training ground sponsor, training kit sponsor, but I didn't want to say it, like I've always said, without more confirmation. And I went to them and I said, out of interest, will you be also training the sponsorship kits? And they said, the training kits. And they went, no, it's just that our hoardings will be up around the stadium. And obviously you have to take them for their word, and here we are a few weeks later, they're confirmed as the one I thought they were. But there you go. I understand it. Sometimes stuff's got to be kept a little cloak and dagger while you finalise all the fine print and the details and all that. But there, finally, they have that. And, I don't know the exact figures, but certainly other ones out there are pretty lucrative. So this could be a big thing for Spurs going forward. So that's that. What else we got here? David asks, where do you see Spurs in 3 years' time? Oh, I hope doing really well. I hope that Nuno has smashed it and his 2-year deal has been extended and Spurs, are flying and are certainly back to being a consistent top 4 side. That's what I want. Hopefully have some trophies. What else we got here? Peter Holman asks, just a question, do Spurs have overseas scouts because we always seem to buy other clubs' players? I get what you mean. Technically, pretty much every player is, unless you're a free agent, is another club's players. Spurs do have a network of scouts out across certainly Europe. I think they've got some in South America as well, and I'm sure they'll have loads of kind of. It's a strange one. Sometimes they use agencies, clubs do. Sometimes like let's for example, I've completely gone out of my name. I wrote about him a million times. You'll all tell me. The chap that we all everyone wanted to come in as the sporting director at Tottenham, Mourinho's mate. Oh my goodness, it's gone out of my head. But there you go. He owns a big company that essentially runs scouting for lots of clubs, even though he's not connected to those clubs. And I think it's not just, and I'm not saying this is the case with Spurs. I think Spurs is mostly just scouts on the ground, as it were. But a lot of clubs do also use these kind of agencies and companies. It might come to me as this goes on. I know what happened now. What will happen is everyone that's watching this point in the video leaves a comment telling me exactly who I mean. And then nobody sees the comments below and I end up getting 100 people telling me the name of the person who's gone completely out of my head. Right, more questions. Paratici. Sorry, I just read that in a comment. It just reminded me I can now properly say his name. Right, next one. Cam Wheeler asks, do you think we can push for a Champions League position this season, and how do you think we'll do in the cup competitions? As I said before, I think this could be a good year for Spurs. You know me, I'm try to be quite a positive person. I'm not the one that likes to get dragged down by everything, despite what the mad things that happen with Tottenham. I think Spurs can push for a top 4 place. I think everyone else has, there's been a lot of money spent by the big boys. However, that doesn't always guarantee success. We've seen that a lot. Sometimes it's all about the team that's just got the best kind of vibe almost, the togetherness and everything. And what I'm seeing from Nuno thus far looks like he's trying to create that. And I think that could be a big part of things. Interesting one. Richard Pugh asks, with all the talk of Tottenham needing a creative midfielder, are there any thoughts about Harvey White filling that role? I liked what I've seen of him so far, and he's a free kick specialist too. I like Harvey White. I think he's very good. I think he's probably seen Niall John get ahead of him, I think, in terms of the midfield right now. He didn't go out on loan, which I think is mostly to do with the fact there's just so many competitions for Spurs with the Johnson's Paint, it's not called that anymore, Papa John's Trophy for Spurs under 21s are in that competition. And obviously the Europa Conference League will provide opportunities for young players as well. I like him. He takes a terrific free kick. His set pieces are superb, actually. His corners are very good as well. I just think maybe he's slightly slipped in the pecking order right now, just because Niall John has impressed a lot of people. And then you've got, I think it's a case of maybe for him just kind of getting what minutes he can, in what cup competitions he can, and then in January maybe reassessing and having a look. I think the same probably for Jack Clark as well. Let's have a look. George Cooper asks, why did Serge Aurier want to leave Spurs for 4 years? I wouldn't say it was exactly 4 years. Certainly the last 3 summers he has. He said after the first one, I think it was something like his personal reasons. I don't know whether it was family related or something. I just think I think he just pretty much has wanted to get back to France for a fair old bit. I mean, we still don't know exactly where he's going. Obviously, we've seen the links with Arsenal, we've seen the links with various other clubs. Yeah, he's a funny one. He's settled. He was very popular within the squad, but for just some unknown reason, just never really took. I mean, I guess in Poch's last season, he wasn't full season. He wasn't first choice. Trippier was. Mourinho did make him his first choice, but it was always a bit of an iffy relationship. You remember him calling him out as well a few times. And then, it was made quite clear, I think this summer, to be honest, he wanted to leave and Spurs were like, yeah, we're quite happy for you as well. He wasn't going to sign a new contract. And that's it. I don't think there was any really kind of, big, not like drama. I think it was just Serge Aurier. Right. Alan McCartney asked, hi Ali, good pieces there. A question for you. I heard what you said, but now the dust has settled, are there any out-of-contract strikers we could get in for the season to get a bit of squad depth? Yeah, I'd probably say no. That's not to rule it out, because I think there's some, is Llorente maybe even still available? You never know if there was an injury crisis. I'd say right now, from everything I hear, that they believe that with Kane, with Son, fingers crossed he isn't injured, young Dane Scarlett coming through as well, and Lucas being able to play up front if they require him as well. I think they'll probably look to see how they get into January, to be honest. If there was a real injury problems and Llorente, say, was still knocking about, just to have him as a backup. But then I think you're probably like me. In the Europa Conference League games, you probably want to see quite a bit of Dane Scarlett, see him getting a go. And I think you bring in another striker, and I do think that he'll block that. Like I said, I'm not going to go into this too much, but as I said before, they were interested if they could get a top level striker. That was a different matter, because that was something for not only the now but the long term. But if it's just a short term measure, they weren't particularly, massively big on that. And that includes a backup striker, which, my views on that. I kind of feel that one probably would have been beneficial. But as I've just said, if Dane Scarlett gets minutes and it helps him develop, then fantastic as well. More questions. What we got? Any news on the training kit sponsors? Stadium naming rights as well, asked Kurt Smith. Nothing on the stadium naming rights at the moment. That's not to say it won't happen. Like I said before, I knew about the training kit sponsor. That was the one that I'd kind of dug up and found. I think there was a story from Mike Keegan in the Daily Mail about the stadium a few months back. I personally hadn't heard any movement on that, but it's got to happen at some point. Todd Klein, the chief finance officer, is the one who's working on that. And he's got experience with that in the NFL. I think it was the Miami Dolphins Stadium he sorted out naming rights for. So it will happen. I think it'll be one of those where, well, you saw how long it took for a training kit sponsor, and that was, probably a fraction of the cost of the deal. God, I don't know why I was talking to so like Peppa Pig, Porky Pig. Let's have a look. Sorry, this is the one downside of me having not got the questions to hand straight away, is that you are going to get me looking for the questions. MA89 asked, do you think Nuno will change his formation now he has a settled squad? Perhaps a 4-2-3-1 to complement more attacking wing-backs? To be honest, the 4-3-3 quite easily becomes the 4-2-3-1. That's kind of the way it works, with Dele Alli pushing up. And I think you may find now with Tanguy Ndombele being integrated back into the matchday squads, that I think he will sit probably more naturally just in front of Højbjerg and Skip, which then kind of very easily becomes a 4-2-3-1 as well. I still think the full-backs will very much be one's allowed to bomb on, one's not. It'd be interesting to see what Emerson Royale now brings to it, and whether you can play him and Reguilon. I'm sure you can against certain teams, but it will require someone like a Højbjerg or a Skip to pull back and create a back three at times. Or he may decide, I think I said this before, of having Tanganga when you're playing Reguilon and Davies when you're playing Emerson Royale. And obviously what that means for Doherty and Sessegnon is another thing. But yeah, I think that's pretty much that one. There's probably not too much to say. I'm trying to get through as many as I can, so apologies if I don't waffle on too long, which some people might be happy with. Electric Forest, do you think we'll bring a backup striker in January? If we will, who would it be? Like I say, you don't know at this point. We literally have just closed the transfer window before. Anything can change. Let's put it this way. Like last February, I could have quite easily said to you, as I think I did, like Spurs had an interest in Sabitzer, let's say. Spurs had an interest in Joachim Andersen at Fulham, obviously Lyon player. There's various players they really liked, but when it comes to, you then had change in head coach, you had a change in managing director of football. While they still like those players, you also had other clubs that maybe were a better fit and gave them more regular football. So we saw Sabitzer, once Bayern come in for a player playing in Germany, it's very unlikely for them to choose elsewhere. Anderson went to... Where did he go? To go to Palace in the end? I should know, bearing in mind they're playing them this weekend. But yeah, sometimes they just don't happen. And this is the thing, isn't it? The perils of my job is that I will possibly get people on Twitter going, you said they were going to sign them, you muppet, why haven't they signed them? Oh, you're wrong, fraud, and all this sort of stuff. But it's just the way things... This is the trouble, is, I have someone asking me 4 months before the transfer window opens again, who are Spurs going to sign? I can say players they're interested in. Does not mean in 4 months' time those players will become Tottenham Hotspur players. It's just the way it is. Just the way the transfer market works. Is on one side, people want clear, concise answers, and on the other side, they will hold you to those clear, concise answers in 4 to 6 months' time when everything has changed. Sorry, that was a bit whingy, wasn't it? I didn't mean that. Right, next one. Anthony Gonzalez, Tottenham Spurs. I don't think that's all your name. Asked, which of the new players are you most looking forward to seeing playing? Romero, when he finally gets back and hopefully gets a run of games for Tottenham, because as I said before, I think he'll be a game changer. And Brian Hill, I think, will be a proper star, but I think he just, as I said before, needs to learn exactly what his position is, what his tasks are, and stick to it rather than roam a bit. I was watching him for the Spain under-21s against Lithuania yesterday. And yeah, he was captain, and I think he set up the first goal as well. There's a lot of talent there. I'm still trying to work out exactly what kind of player he's going to be. I've heard some even say he could be a Modric eventually and be a bit deeper. I don't know. I see potential for him to become Spurs Eriksen. Perhaps that's maybe in Spurs thinking as well. But yeah, I'm really intrigued to see how they develop him, because he's got a lot of skills and abilities in his locker, and it's just which ones they choose to utilise. Because even in the second leg against Pesos, he was playing in a deeper role, and he played well. Right, what else we got? That's a really weird comment that I'm not reading out. This is just a comment. Jordan Collins says, think the Royale thing came from a cartoon character used to sell the jelly. I said last week that I wasn't sure. I just joked, essentially saying, because Emerson Royale's name is not really Emerson Royale. The Royale comes from a nickname from his uncle, who named him after a brand of jelly, or jello, that was sold locally in the Brazil, I think it was Sao Paulo area. And I said, because at that point I didn't know exactly why that was the case, and I joked that maybe he was a bit of a roly-poly kid, which I don't think he was. It was just a joke. And people have pointed out since that it was because there was a character on the front of the jelly, on the packaging, that had this smile that the uncle reminded him of Emerson. And that's why it's called Emerson Royale. Guido Decourt asks, what defines success for Tottenham this season? I think definitely improvement. Whatever, it has to be improvement. There's been a big kind of change in the squad. A lot of main first team squad players, certainly from last season, have now gone. There's a much younger squad, and I think Spurs should be looking to get back into that top four again. I think if they were to finish fifth, climbing up 2 places from last season, I wouldn't say that would be an utter disaster, but I think they will be aiming for top four again, and of course trying to win a trophy. If he could win a trophy, I think that would be huge. I said in the past, and I still stand by it, that an actual trophy doesn't, like a Carabao Cup, let's say, or an FA Cup, doesn't transform a club. And that was Poch's big thing, and I understood what he meant, even though we want that silverware. But I kind of think with Nuno, it transforms the belief around him. I think a lot of players are buying in thus far already into what he's got to say, which is great. But I just think for him to have that trophy under his belt just kind of solidifies that, if you see what I mean. I don't think as the club as a whole it's a huge game changer, but I do think for him and what he wants to achieve at the club it is. You see what I mean? It's maybe slightly two different things. Next question. I'm going to answer one part of this. Hank Kotecha. I am running, by reading these out for the first time, I am running into the possibility of someone having a name that you don't realise is something that might be slightly rude or a silly name. Just double checking that's not. Hey Alistair, simple question. What's your favourite chant and can we get a rendition? I'm not going to give you a rendition. My favourite chant, I used to really like Everywhere You Go, Always Take Lamella With You. I like that. I like the Dele Alli one. I do. This is the trouble with chants, isn't it? So few of them are actually original. You go to other grounds and you hear other clubs singing it with their players' names in the chant, and it's really, really weird. I'm trying to think of other ones that I really like. Oh, there's loads. I like most of them. I've always said, and people will probably hate the fact that I say this, it's not in the question, but my least favourite one is probably Stand Up If You Hate Arsenal. And I know a lot of people like that chant, and I apologise, it's not meant to be a slight on anyone in any way. I think I've always been, and I was the same before as a reporter when I was just purely a Spurs fan going to games, I just wanted to focus on Tottenham. I didn't care about the others. I just feel that, and you hear, and I apply this to, Arsenal fans that do it, and Chelsea fans that do it as well, and West Ham fans that maybe do it as well. It's almost like having this mentality of we're looking at what others are doing. It's just, I don't care. I really don't. I think for me, it's just all about what Tottenham are doing. And I don't know. I mean, some people have said, it's a small club mentality to always be thinking about the other clubs and all that. And I don't know. It's just not a chant that's ever really been one of my favourites. Maybe it's like something as like a little kid, everyone was standing up in front of me and I then couldn't see what was happening. I don't know. But yeah, that one has just never really done it for me. Bob P asks, I'd like to ask your insight into whether the club and Harry Kane will agree a new deal. I would have thought both parties want to avoid a repetition of what just happened, so a new longer contract with mutually agreed release clauses would suit everyone. Right, agree to a part of that. I wouldn't be entirely shocked if Harry Kane now ends up staying at Spurs for the rest of his career. I wouldn't be surprised. I do think maybe this summer was his big chance before maybe next summer you get more. The market is flooded with other strikers like Mbappe and Haaland come onto the market probably. I wouldn't be stunned if he signs a new contract, but I'd be very surprised if there was a release clause. I think Spurs very rarely do that. The only one I can think of is Toby Alderweireld, and that was, I think some people say that it was some kind of thing. They had to bring that over from his Southampton contract. I can't remember what the reasoning was, but even that didn't work because he didn't get a move anywhere because no one paid the price. I'd be interested to see what happens with Harry Kane now. Spurs have a great season. I wouldn't be stunned if he sticks around for the long term. I think obviously he'll be getting closer to Jimmy Greaves' record. If he doesn't, I think might be a push to break it this season, but you never know with Harry Kane. Pep Guardiola was quite definitive. Good luck, mate, with your career, essentially, is what he said, didn't he, after the window, or after Harry Kane said he was staying at Spurs. It doesn't sound like it's coming out. Maybe the only one would be United. And even then, does being at Man United guarantee the silverware in the same way anymore that Man City did? I'd probably say not as much. I'd be surprised now if he doesn't stick around. But then, hey, depends what the relationship is like now with Harry Kane behind the scenes with people at the club, I guess. Wuta asked, I'm interested in the role and influence Ian Cathro has on the team. Heard he led the training when Nuno's in Portugal for the game against Pesos. He seems really close with the players. I think I've spoken about this before, but Ian Cathro's fascinating, really fascinating character. He's a bit of a kind of a young coaching prodigy genius. He really was, and a lot of people have used that word genius with him. Hearts fans might not be as enamoured with him because he did have a little spell trying to be the head coach himself or manager, and it didn't quite work out for him. But in terms of a coach, a lot of people have very good things to say about him. Yes, while Spurs were out for the away leg in Pesos, all the players that remained, which were pretty much everyone that started the Man City game, I think it was, he was leading the training for, because Nuno and him go way back. They met on their coaching qualifications course way back in the day. I must admit, excuse me, I haven't heard too much of what the players make of him thus far, other than most of the players. Obviously, some will have little whinges and grievances, but most of the players are happy with everything that's come with the new regime thus far. But yeah, keep an eye on Ian Cathro, because I do think he'll be a big part of things. You know, Nuno adores him. It'd be interesting to see. He's quite young. He's, obviously with Spurs having a young squad, is probably, I'm trying to think if Nuno might be older than him. Hugo Lloris might be older than him. That's the thing, Spurs now, Sonny's the third oldest. Like, Hugo, I think, is the only player Spurs have got in their 30s now. I think Doherty and Son are both 29. I think they're the next two oldest. I think Doherty's second oldest. It might be weird for him. He's at a club maybe before where he's had older players that maybe have got to get used to this young guy telling him what to do. Whereas at Spurs, he's still older than all bar one, the captain. So, Sorry, I didn't really answer the question too much, but I think he's one to kind of wait and see. I'm hoping to get an interview. I've asked a fair few times thus far already, and I think he's a little bit shy at the moment, but I'm hoping to get that at some point. Mr. V asks, are you worried we didn't sign a backup striker and a creative midfielder? I feel we haven't replaced Bale and Vinicius from last season. I'd completely agree on the goal front. Bale scored 16, Vinicius 10, so that's 26 goals that have come out of the team. I think the attacking players having maybe slightly less defensive duties than they did under Mourinho may free some of those up to score more goals. So I'd expect goals from Lucas. I think Hill will kind of weigh in with some as well. I think Bergwijn, once he gets the first, will start scoring goals as well. I said this, I don't want to go over old ground. Last week, essentially, I said I did believe that a backup striker and an advanced playmaker probably were required. Would have been helpful. But like others have said in the comments, I can't remember who it was, otherwise I'd name check you, but someone said, as I was scrolling through here, you're never going to fix everything in one transfer window. And for Paratici, that was very much, this is an ongoing process of developing and fixing the squad and creating one for long-term sustained success. So yes, I think it was Mourinho. I asked Mourinho about this before, and he said, look, any manager in the world is always going to tell you they weren't entirely happy with the window. There's always more you could have done. And I think that's the case for Spurs. And it'll be interesting to see how January is normally quite a quiet month for Spurs and a lot of clubs in the transfer window. I'd be intrigued to see with Paratici, it's slightly different. And whether we see a little bit more action in January in terms of incoming players. And like I say, I think you'll probably see a fair few loans go out as the cup competitions kind of stop or dry up, or hopefully don't for Spurs. But, maybe they've just become more serious and you can't place kind of younger players, as it were. But also, it'd be interesting to see whether they do address some areas. And obviously, injuries always create these different scenarios as well. Ben Thurston asked, now the French Mafia has been disbanded, do you think Ndombele will be forced to settle into the squad more? I heard that Serge and Musa were becoming a bad influence. Interested to get your opinion. I wouldn't go that far. I can't think. I think it's too easy to just say that they were a bad influence. I didn't hear that. I didn't get any impression that they were. What I would say about Musa and Serge is they were probably two of the hardest workers out there. Certainly on the training ground as well. So, no, I wouldn't say. I think that's really unfair on them. What I would say, and I think I said this before, don't think there's any harm in just having fresh people around you sometimes when you've been a bit down, I guess, and wanting to leave. I think having different people that you naturally turn to, because Sissoko and Oreo were clearly a massive help to Ndombele in settling in. They were like brothers to him. I'm not saying, as I said before, I'm not saying they walk around holding his hands while he skips around the training. It's not his mum and dad or anything. But I just think, just having that fresh look on things and fresh voices. And that's not to say he wasn't already friends with other people. He drove in with Sessegnon every day to training. He's good mates with Son, with Kane as well, I think. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens next with Ndombele. I'm not going to go on and on about Ndombele and how much I adore the natural gifts he has as a footballer, but ultimately it's down to Ndombele, and that's what the next, whatever it is, 4 months or so, roughly 4 months, will show us how much he really wants to be a top footballer, I think. Next one, let's go. That's not a question. Stephen Lloyd asked, with some of the things Jose said about the players coming true, Jaffet and Skip, etc., do you feel he was harshly treated at Spurs, and do you feel COVID played a part in that, with the broken up training and funds being an issue? I think I've said this before. I think Jose Mourinho had certainly some excuses that he could be quite right to use. I think it was a tough time. I would say that he did. It's a difficult one. On one hand, and I said this before, I was more excited at the end of the last summer transfer window probably than I was when this one closed, because I thought it was a very good squad. I think he was probably let down by the fact that he didn't get that top centre-back like we're hoping Romero can be. Although, obviously, some people might point to the fact that Nuno has got Dyer and Sanchez in that back four, the same back four, pretty much. Aurier aside, with 3 clean sheets to start the season, including one against Man City, and he started very well with them. It's a tough one. I think we need more time before looking back on the Mourinho era. I think obviously a lot of people have looked back on his Man United time and quite rightly said a lot of the things that he said then clearly were the case and came to pass. With Tottenham, I think there are obviously deficiencies in the squad. But, they did a lot of work in the transfer windows under Mourinho as well. But it just didn't happen. I think for me, tactics did play a part. I don't entirely think the way he dealt with the players was always the greatest. I think his style works with some players superbly and with some not. And I think we're seeing with Dele, I saw some Mourinho fans kind of claiming the work that Dele's put in this summer is all because of Jose. I wouldn't say that's the case, because if that was the case, he would have done it under Jose. It's a difficult one. I think maybe ask me that one again. Maybe in another season's time. I think we'll get a better sense of the Mourinho era. I think that's what happened with United. I think you were able to look back and see whether what he did was impressive. Obviously, he took him to second place and won trophies with him. It was a bit different at Tottenham, but what I'd say for him, he wasn't coming into Spurs at the easiest of times. I think that's probably the best way to say it. That's not a question. Ooh. I don't know the answer to that one. There you go. There's a question that I can't actually answer, really. I mean, Sal Sallow asked, what was the real reason why Nuno left Wolves? That's one that maybe I'll ask him at some point. There was a lot of talk that he just wanted to spend time with his family. It was an incredibly difficult season, that one, for him. He had a lot of time apart from his family because they were stuck in Portugal during the lockdowns. I think it was just one where mentally it was just a very, very tough time for him. And I just think, he decided he was going to leave Wolves. It was the right time. Some might tell you it was mutual. Obviously, it had been a difficult season all round. And obviously, he just got that time away from the game for a couple of months. And now he's Tottenham manager. I don't think there's probably much more deeper to it, but I will ask. As always, if I don't know something, I will ask. I'm hoping that we get some kind of proper sit down with Nuno at some point. What else we got? Excellent. This is the thing. I must admit, I went on the Fighting Cock podcast last week, and they asked for questions to come in. And all the really funny questions weren't used. And I mean, there were a lot of good questions still used. I really enjoyed it. It was really good with Flav, I think it was, I was on with. I think it was Flav I was on with. And it was really, really good. He's a lovely guy, and it was a really good chat. But I kind of said to him at the end, I was like, you didn't ask me some of the fun questions expecting, like, who would win in a fight between Steve Hitchen and Fabio Paratici? You know, I was all ready to answer that. And he was like, well, I must admit, I kind of didn't know whether you'd want to answer those kind of questions. And it's like, if you guys know me, I love talking about stupid, silly stuff all the time. And by the way, I did actually record a little bit extra answering that question, but I don't think it ended up making into it. Maybe the recording just didn't quite work, or it was too hard to fit it in. But my answer was Steve Hitchen. My logic was Steve Hitchen, I think, was a bit of a kind of a bruising defender for Blackburn, Macclesfield, teams like that, whereas Paratici, I think, was more of an elegant libero type, more a midfielder who could also play in defence. So, whereas he may know the dark arts, I was going for Hitchen for pure brute strength. So the reason I asked that was because K Fabi, Fabe, Fabi, asks, would you rather fight one Ali Gold sized duck or 100 duck sized Ali Gold? Ali Gold. I would. Oh, it's a difficult one. I would probably go for the one Ali Gold sized duck, because at least you've just got the one target to worry about. Whereas 100 of me nipping around my heels would probably prove to be overwhelming, like little dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. I think you see them at the start of Lost World, the second one as well. Something compies. I think they call them compies as a nickname. The little ones that essentially look really cute, and then they absolutely submerge you and then bite all your skin off. Not saying that that's what I'd be like, but I'd imagine one of me would be easier to deal with, albeit a one-sized me of a duck. I'd still think a duck would be quite awkward. Yes, I do realise I spent the last minute talking about a me-sized duck. Right, that one. I've already done that one. That's about stadium. Well, weirdly, someone else asked me about the chant and whether I can sing it as well. This not so much a question but a statement, but I will answer it just in case there isn't a question about him above. Harry Goodrich asks, or says, Dylan Markanday, great little player. I don't know if that's, maybe I mentioned him in the last video, I can't remember now. But I'm going to pretend the exclamation mark on great little player is a question mark. Great little player. He's been fantastic, Dylan Markanday. Honestly, ended the season really well, started this season superbly. I am really hoping that he's one of these players where just plays so well, he gets himself noticed. And I think, he was on the bench for the home game against Pesos, and I don't think that'll be the last time we'll see that happen. If he continues what he's doing, you cannot ignore what he's doing. He's been superb. Excuse me. I kind of liken it slightly to the Jaffet situation. Jaffet Tanganga was, maybe coming towards potentially the end of his time at Spurs. His contract was running out a bit. He'd been unfortunate with international call-ups or injuries. He'd missed a few pre-seasons under Poch when he would have been called up. And then he got that trip to Asia with the first team and he smashed it. And from then on, it kind of changed everything for him. And I really hope with Dylan that we get to see it, because he's always had the ability. And for me, obviously, I watched a lot of him in academy games until the pandemic kind of hit, and then we weren't really allowed in to watch academy games so much. So I've kind of missed this last year of him pushing on. And for me, before that, I always felt he had everything there, but just for some reason wasn't just showing that he was really one of the most gifted players there. And it just feels like now, what's happened in that last year is it's clicked. He's found it. And I really hope. He reminds me a little bit of his gait and the way he kind of runs, a little bit of Marcus Edwards about him. And he's, I've really got a lot of hope for him. And even if it doesn't work for Spurs, in this season, I'd like to see him maybe go out on loan in January and show what he can do, up against adult defences and stuff like that. And then say adult defences, he's in the Papa John's Trophy now, so we'll get to see that as well. He is a great little player, is the answer to that. Next one. That was about goals in midfield. I've kind of covered that. Done that one. Right, Romero asked, what inspired you to be a Spurs journalist? Right, it was a little bit of a two-part question, or two-part answer to that one. So, first off, in a really childlike manner, when I was a kid, I was a big fan of both Superman and Indiana Jones. So my two choices in life, I'd pretty much laid out for myself, were that I was either going to be a journalist, a reporter, like Clark Kent, or I was going to be a world globe-trotting archaeologist getting into adventures and scrapes like Indiana Jones. Clearly, the latter, I discovered, archaeology wasn't quite what it was painted to be nowadays in Raiders of the Lost Ark and so on. Whereas I kind of found that actually I wasn't that awful at writing. So that kind of got me into that route. And then the more I wrote, the more I realised, okay, I can kind of do this. I started out in news reporting, did that for 4 or 5 years, which, really I think helped me structure what I do today. It gives you a great grounding. I always say that as sports journalists nowadays are just desperate to get straight into sport, writing about football, whatever, and I get it. I get the impatience to crack on. Whereas I think my slightly longer journey there did help me. I think those 4 or 5 years writing about crime, talking to people that have lost loved ones, even doing the more mundane stuff that might seem mundane to you, as like going to charity tea parties and stuff like that, and interviewing people, and God, some of the things I had to do which just awful in terms of the scenarios that poor people were in. I remember having to go around to someone's house that was burnt down and interview them while they were walking around the rubble of their house. I had to do the worst thing for reporters, which is still nothing compared to the people you're actually doing it to, is knocking on people's doors of people that have died. And you'd find that, 80% of the time, what you really wanted from it really was a tribute about that person. I know sometimes you get maybe slightly more muckraking journalists, which maybe give others a bad name, that their intent is to just get information, get in there, bang, bang, we don't care about your grief. But because I was working in a local newspaper, it was more about, would you like to say some nice words about this person that's died? It was more that. It was more to kind of flesh out this character you were writing about, rather than just saying, Joe Blogs 28 died, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to do that. And 80% of the time, I'd say, maybe even 90% of the time, they wanted to tell someone how wonderful their son, daughter, parents were, whatever it is. 10% of the time, and I'd even go as far to say 15, maybe more percent of the time, they'd just be a polite no. And then you've got some people that are just quite upset that you were knocking on that, and I completely understood that. If you know me, if you gathered any sense of me, I'm certainly not that kind of person that would, and I hated doing them. I hated it. So I've gone a bit off topic now, but my point is that all of that kind of gives you the structure and gives you the foundation for being a sports reporter. It allows you to have the context when you've written about the most horrific deaths, when you've been at inquests, when you've been at court cases, when you've seen about the terrible things that happen in life to people just through no fault of their own often. You've kind of you struggled to get angry about a transfer that didn't happen and things like that. And I think maybe that helps me have a little bit more balance in what I do. And in terms of sports reporting, made the switch into sports reporting at a local level, kind of rose up the ranks, became a group sports editor. I was kind of in charge of what was going on the sports pages of about 6-7 different newspapers towards the end. And then we started to cover the Spurs. And Football.London started up. I was already covering Spurs as part of our local newspaper thing because Hotspur Way was within one of the patches for the Hertfordshire Mercury that I used to be in charge of their sport. And Football.London said, we like what you're doing. Do you want to come across and write Spurs every day? I think they kind of thought, as a group sports editor, he probably won't want to give up what was kind of a lofty position, I guess, in the local newspaper world. Come on. Like I wasn't going to leap at the chance. Growing up as a Spurs fan, it's like a dream job. And that's why I am doing what I'm doing now. Right, I'm going to answer another couple before I don't really want to go over the hour mark. I can do another one of these at some point. What else we got? Baggio76 asks, in your opinion, were there offers for Harry Winks? Did he want to leave? I understand there was interest in Harry Winks. I understand that he didn't want to leave. He wanted to fight for his spot at Tottenham, and that's why we're at where we're at now. And, you know, he could end up starting at Palace. We'll see. Lula Lafol asks, I'm trying to quickfire some of these now. Why does Lloris remain club captain over Kane? And do you think that making Kane captain this season will make any difference to our success on the field or contribute towards persuading him to stay at the club? I think people might know my opinion on this because I've probably said it before. I think Lloris is a very good club captain. I don't think we always see, certainly when the fans weren't there, I got to hear a lot more of how Lloris organises the back line. I think we got to see in the Amazon documentary what he's like behind the scenes. You know, he's a World Cup winning captain. I'd say as a leader, he is a leader. I'd think Kane, for me, is more of a bit more like Ledley was, more of a leader by example rather than words. And I've always felt that. I'll always point to that game when Lloris got injured against Brighton. I just never felt that Kane rallied the troops like they needed to be done. They were still in shock. It might be unfair, but I just haven't seen that in other times when he's been captain. For me, if there's going to be a more natural captain coming in, you know, if Lloris were to leave at the end of his contract next summer, I think it's Højbjerg. But I do wonder whether politically Kane will still get it with Højbjerg being his vice captain. Stephen Brown says, could we recall Keon Atete if injuries become bad? Keon's doing well at, oh my God, it's gone out of my head where he is. He's in Northampton, I think. I was only doing the lone roundup on him the other day. He started well, scored a couple of goals in the Carabao Cup, and yeah, reviews. I've been reading a lot of the stuff. But whenever I do my loan roundup, I try and read what the local reporters say about him, and he's been getting good reviews. I'd say that I think pretty much all loan deals for Spurs players have a January recall clause. So if that were the case, then why not? Personally, I think I'd leave him there to help his development, play every week in, week out. Another one. Let's choose maybe one more. Stewie wants to request his membership to Tongi Ndombele fan club. I'll sort that out. That'll be in the post, a laminated card. Martin Hannah asks, how did you get that little scar under your left eye? I think that's my right eye. It's technically, oh no, it is my left. Sorry, it reverses it. I don't think it's a scar. I think the actual, probably normal, less exciting thing. I could have said it's just like Indiana Jones when he tries to whip back the lion in the Last Crusade and he catches himself. I think it was just a spot about a week ago that hasn't really stopped being discoloured. Sorry, that's a really slightly gross and not exciting one. Lewis asks, will Nuno actually put Ndombele back into matchday squads now he's staying? I think he will. I think his Spurs club record signing, I think there'll be that little bit of pressure that he does, and I think Ndombele will have to focus naturally anyway. I wouldn't be. He's back in the Europa Conference League squad because that's it's natural. I think they've got the correct numbers. Finally, homegrown players and foreign player limits I don't have to worry about because they fit in, and so every player that can be is in that squad. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Shocked as I was talking like that. Wouldn't be shocked if he starts against Rennes, and he could well be on the bench against Palace if he's been working hard enough. And you got Nola Celso, quite possibly. I've kind of answered that one, so I don't want to answer that again. Right, we'll answer one more. What we got here? Oh, someone did ask about Dylan Markanday. Sorry, Peter Brown, but I have kind of spoken about it already. Right, last one. Rob Gravestock asks, if we have a strong player, one player that would likely flourish is Reguilon. Do Real Madrid still have a buyback clause, and when does it expire? Could it be triggered in January? I understand. He also said, if Real were to execute the clause, do Spurs have a plan? I understand that, yes, last summer was the first one, and next summer is the next occasion that they can try and buy him back. I don't think it's in January. I think it's only in the 2 summers. And I think the plan was, if they did, then you have Sessegnon and Davies. I think Sessegnon obviously has to push on now. Big season for him. And we'll see how it goes. Right, I'm going to wrap up there. So I don't want to go over the hour mark. Some people moan. Some people like it, but some people moan. So yeah, hopefully answered plenty in that. There's loads more on there, and I will do another one. We've got an international break coming each of the next 3 months or 2 months, so I shall do more. So don't worry, and then we'll be back next week as normal, talking about what happened with Palace. So as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.